Today, we get to start and kick off a brand new series that we are calling In the Ring. And it's going to be about marriage. It's going to be about relationships. And I get the incredible honor of starting it today, kicking it off for us. Because as you well know, Pastor Jerry is in Uganda today. And it's the evening right now. And he's over there. He's doing so much incredible ministry. He's baptizing enough people that his arms are really tired. And so I'm excited about that. Can't wait to hear him when he gets back, tell us all of the testimony about that. But I wanted to stop right now, look into the camera, and welcome all of our campuses, not only Uganda, but also Hartselle, Madison, and all of you joining us on the other side of computer screens all over the place as one church in multiple locations. Can we just clap our hands and welcome our church family? So glad to be here today. Well, listen, I said we're kicking off a new series today called In the Ring, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could just pull from some of the incredible couples that we have at our church, some of the knowledge, some of the wisdom that they have. And so today, joining us is Pastor Steve and Angie, our global children's pastors. Can we just make them feel welcome this morning? So, Pastor Steve, Angie, we've done ministry for a number of years together, and we've been just been able to, as a family, look at your life and really as a ministry team that we've seen God do incredible things through you. It's one of the things that I've always done is look at these guys right here, and my wife Deborah and I, we have looked at you and said, well, if we could be like Pastor Steve and Angie, we'll be okay, because I don't know if, maybe you're just faking it, but you seem like you're doing it pretty good. You seem happy.
Faking it.
Okay. So today we want to know all of your faking tips. No, we want to just sit at the feet of the masters today. And I want to get some questions answered from you. How you're doing it. What's the secret sauce? What is the reason why you're able to be successful? I'm going to start with a kind of a softball question here, okay? How long have you been married, and what'd you do on your first date?
We've been married 32 short years.
And our first date was at the Shawnee Big Boy. It was delicious. We had that fudge cake, That's what we
Pastor
did.
Steve knows how to do it. He just takes her to the Shawnee Big Boy. Well, we can't learn from that because I don't even know if there's any Shawnees available anymore. We're going to have to find something else from that. Let me dive in with maybe a little bit of a deeper question, okay? What is the one thing that you've had to sacrifice for your marriage over these years?
My front yard at Christmas.
If you don't know, Pastor Steve and Angie have what's called Toontown, right? And it's an incredible display. Toonville.
It's called Barnum and Bailey threw up in the front yard. That's what it's called.
It's a bunch of Christmas lights and stuff. What would you say, Pastor Steve?
Well, to be serious, when I think about what we've had to sacrifice for our marriage, I don't think of one big thing like sacrifice our career or anything like that. I think of consistently, consistently like having to intentionally love Angie with her love language, because ours are totally different. Like her love language, for instance, is quality time and acts of service. However, my love language is physical touch and words of affirmation. So you can see already that from the very beginning,
Handsome today.
We're totally opposite as far as what speaks to us. Okay, so it's been a challenge over the years to learn to love her. Not that I want to love you.
Am I going to put an end to this streak by having you up here?
It doesn't come naturally to me to love her in her love language. Okay, stop taking everything the wrong way. and same thing with her and me. So to me, that's been intentional. It's been sometimes a challenge because we're immature when we were younger, so we didn't understand that. But yeah, to me, it's just being consistent over time to love her the way she deserves to be loved.
It's on.
All right, let me ask this question, try and bail you out here, if I can. What is the way, maybe there's a number of ways, or what tips can you give us to keep passion alive over the years? You've been married all these years. How have you kept passion going?
We can say this in church.
You can, yes.
Pole dancing. No. Handcuffs.
She's kidding.
None of those. I'm kidding. Just keeping it fresh, doing new things. Steve got me a book for Christmas called Adventure Challenge. That is cool that you like scratch off. It tells you how much the date will cost, how much time it will be if you have to go out of town or not. So we just try to do like fun things like that, new and fun things.
Yeah, and just doing the simple things. It's no reality to anybody, but just simple surprises, notes in her car, just things like that she's not expecting. It's not on a holiday, but just little things like that. And like she said, taking adventures together and trying to, be like it was when we were dating. You know what I'm saying? So just try to keep that throughout the...
Small things consistently done over time. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you one last question. What if you had one thing that you could impart to anybody, maybe a young married couple, maybe they haven't been married as long as you, or maybe they've been married for some time. If you could give them one bit of advice that you would say, this is going to help your marriage, what would that be?
Well, I'm going to be real right here. So when I was in my early 20s, I was very immature, and I thought I had done everything the right way. I did do things the right way, like as far as I did not have an example at home when I was growing up of a healthy marriage. So I had made up my mind. I was like, okay, I'm going to read marriage books. I'm going to listen to Focus on the Family. I'm going to listen to the cassette tapes from them. I'm going to, listen to the radio broadcast. I'm going to do all those things. I saved myself for marriage. I prayed. I didn't just date anybody. I told God, I want to honor you. I want to honor my future spouse. So I did all those things the right way. And so I kind of, not consciously, but I think subconsciously, I felt like I deserved somebody that's going to make me happy. I deserve, somebody that's going to meet all my needs. And so when we got married, the first year, because you're still in that honeymoon stage, it was okay. We enjoyed being together. But then, the second year comes around and reality sets in. And all of a sudden, when I didn't get my needs met or when she didn't do things like I thought, that I deserved because I did everything the right way, then that's when I realized, okay, there's something, it wasn't working because I was not mature enough to step back and say, what does love require of me? If love is not entitlement, love is sacrifice and love is giving. And I wasn't mature enough to see that at first. And I thought, oh, she's supposed to meet all my needs. And I would get mad when she wouldn't, and I didn't understand. Because I did everything the right way. And then, I was reading a book recently by Andy Stanley, one of his new books, and it's questions that you ask before you make any major decision in your life. And the last part of that is about relationships. And the question is, when there's a conflict in your marriage, things aren't going right, you stop and you say, hey, what does love require of me? And in those moments when we're upset, we've run into a brick wall, when things aren't going well, if both partners will step back and say, what does love, 1 Corinthians type of love, what does love require of me? And if we will obey that, then there's nothing that we can't get through in marriage. And I think it took a while for me to learn that, personally, speaking for myself. So,
is that good? Isn't that good stuff? Hey, I want to thank you guys so much for coming and helping with this, because I think what you just said just spoke volumes. Before they get up and leave, can you just one more time at all of our campuses, can you show a little love to the Patricks? Thank you so much. Their marriage is kind of an anomaly in that if you've been married for a long time, let me say it this way. If I were to present to you two couples, a newlywed couple and a couple that has been married for maybe 5 or 10 years, which one would you automatically assume would be the happier of the two? Come on, if you're online, you can type it in the comments. Which one, newlyweds or long-termers? Most of the time when I talk to people about that, without seeing a couple like the Patricks, the people will say, if I said, which one would be happier? Most people say, well, the one that would be happiest would be the newlyweds. And there's a number of different reasons why. I've asked people, well, why do you think the newlyweds? Well, they say, well, they're new to this, and they're young, and they're passionate, they have more energy. One woman I asked that too said, they have no kids. That's why they're happy. And I get that there's a lot of reasons why that may be the case, why we may think that they would be happiest. But I think one of the main reasons why we think that the newlyweds would be happiest of all is something that we've bought into in our culture. It's something that television and movies and Netflix have taught us a whole lot on. And it's this concept that if you first fall in love, there's no feeling like it. Like there's no feeling when you first just fall in love. We just couldn't control ourselves. We were just falling into love. I think that's one of the dumbest things that we've bought into as a culture, to believe that the whole reason why we would be happy earlier on as a rookie rather than a veteran in marriage is because we fell into something. Like if you think about it, falling is dumb. If you've ever fallen before, I have fallen. I thought about this recently. I took my family not that long ago to play laser tag in Arab. They had this place and they had pay once and you could play as much laser tag as you wanted, which we thought was a good idea. At this period of time, we had been real busy and we had been under a lot of stress and stuff like that. And so nothing takes out anger and hostility quite like fake shooting your wife and kids. It's healthy, I'm telling you. And so we went to this place, and you've probably played laser tag before. You know, it's all dark. They got the black lights, glow in the dark, and the obstacles. And we were playing this one game called Agent. And in Agent, you have one member of your family. It was basically us because it was like the middle of the week, so it was just us. And one member of the family is one color and everybody else is the other color. And the way this works is whoever shoots that person last, then they become the agent and everybody turns on them. Now they tell you in this place, they say, don't run, multiple times, do not run. But I found that when your wife and your kids all turn on you, that don't run stuff goes right out the window. I mean, because we were playing this game, and the way this works, I did figure out why they were trying to stress don't run is because they had these two ramps that led up to an upper platform. And on one of the ramps was this little ledge that would go right about halfway and then just disappear. And so what happened was I was up there on the top ramp, and I had my son just cornered with my amazing laser tag skills. And so I had him in the corner, and I nailed him. I got it, which means now I'm the agent, and everybody turns on me. And so I tore off. I took off running in the dark, down the ramp there, and I thought it would also be a good idea to shoot behind my back while I was doing it. And so my foot landed on that little ledge of the ramp. And when I got to a certain point, that ledge went away, and so I started to fall. And I'm talking, it was an epic fall. Like, you know, the kind of like guns and vests and arms and legs. I mean, like everything is just going everywhere. I fell so long that I had enough time to think this is going to hurt. And I was right, because I ended at the very bottom there. I don't even know where they came from. I ended up in a mop bucket. I was in a bucket and garbage cans, and I was just falling everywhere. I split open my jeans. I gashed my leg. I'm bleeding. And then that would be bad enough if it weren't for the fact that then here comes my family. And I don't know what I have done to create a culture like this, but I'm fairly confident it was me, because they never stopped shooting me. I'm lying there pulling my broken body out of a mop bucket, and they're going pew, 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 pew. Now, I will give them this. They at least said, "Are you okay, Dad? Pew, pew, pew. Are you all right, honey? Pew, 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 pew." And I said, "Yes, I'm fine, and I'm dead. Quit shooting." And so I got up, and I'm hobbling now. I'm all messed up. And then there's the young teenage kid that's supposed to be refereeing it. And he said, "Are you okay, mister?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fine. I just fell. See, falls are always accidental, and they almost always end in pain. But at some point in our culture, we decided that the best thing that you could do with the second most important relationship that you'll ever have in this life is to fall. We need to fall in love. I mean, think about it. The first most important relationship you'll ever have is your relationship with God, but the second one is your spouse. And we decided that the best thing, the future of that relationship, is completely and totally dependent on an accident. We fell in love. Oh, we just fell. We fell, and we couldn't control ourselves. Now don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to take romance out of marriage and dating and relationships. I'm a big fan of romance. I'm an absolute proponent of passion, but I think this concept of falling needs to be so far removed from our marriage, it has no place in it. I believe this. Number one, you can write this down in your notes. The two greatest components of a strong marriage are passion and sacrifice. Passion and sacrifice are the two things that not only make a great marriage between a husband and a wife, but also with God. Remember, God calls us the bride of Christ. And I think the problem is we put a huge emphasis on the passion part, but we leave out the second part, the part about sacrifice. I think a lot of couples think that if the passion is gone in their marriage, then it's completely broken. And there's no way to fix it because they haven't focused enough on the second part, that sacrifice. See, a truly great marriage combines the heat of passion and the power of sacrifice. And when God is brought together in the center of this, what you have is something so powerful, it's called a covenant. And you cannot have a truly great marriage unless both passion and sacrifice exist, because without passion, you have no life, you have no energy, but without commitment, without the sacrifice, you have no commitment. And so when both passion and sacrifice exist in the form of a covenant, what you have is something so incredibly powerful. And at the same time as it's powerful, it also opens you up to be incredibly vulnerable. I believe this, you can only love to the level that you're willing to be hurt. I mean, think about it. You don't have to be like a graduate level psychologist to get this, right? Like the people that you love the most are also those same people that can hurt you the most. See, that kind of love is not an accident. That you don't just fall into that kind of love. That's a choice. You have to make a choice. See, I don't know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, love at first sight, falling in love, those are just expressions. The problem is those types of love will never sustain you during the difficult moments of your life. The only type of love that will ever sustain you during difficult moments is a covenant love. I think one of the most powerful statements that we can make as humans is the wedding. I love it. It's beautiful and it's powerful, and I like to think it's because of my preaching, but it's not. It has nothing to do with my preaching, because I'll be up there flowing and talking about the importance of this moment and how incredible the marriage is, and no one's paying attention. But guess what happens? As soon as I finish, everybody perks up, because they're anticipating this romantic moment that's going to happen. As the bride and the groom turn to each other, they're thinking to themselves, is it that one that's never showing emotion? Is that one going to like crack? And they're thinking, no, maybe the one that's maybe a little overly emotional, are they going to really go overboard? And it comes that part in the service where they turn for the rings. And the groom does the whole, oh, I've forgotten, and I do the you better not. And he goes, oh, here they are, and I say, you're super original. But once we get past all of that stuff, what really interesting thing happens, the bride and the groom, they turn to each other. And in that moment, they do not use contractual language. They use the language of a covenant. See, there's a reason why I don't invite you to be part of the signing of my 2-year contract for my iPhone, right? Because it's boring, right? That's a business transaction. There's nothing in there that's interesting. But could you imagine if you went in to a wedding and you saw a bride and a groom using contractual language? Like they turned to each other and said, I agree to stay married to you as long as you agree to do the dishes every day. And the other one says, very well, I will agree to stay married to you as long as you maintain no less than $50,000 a year. And the other one turns and says, that's fine, I will stay married with you as long as you agree never to let yourself go after 5 years. We'd all be in trouble on that one, wouldn't we? But listen, like seriously, if you were watching that, you would think, what is this? This is a total ripoff. This is not a wedding. This is a gym contract, right? Because that's not covenant. A contract is totally different. It's dependent on what you do and what I do, but a covenant is different. Covenant is an all-in. I give my everything to you, not just try it out. See, as believers in Christ, we're actually people of covenant. And the problem is we don't really understand covenant at all. I found this definition of covenant, and I want you to look at this because I believe it's really accurate. A covenant is an unconditional agreement entered into with an imperfect person. It's an agreement that has no conditions, and you're walking into it knowing that the other person is flawed and they're messed up and it's going to happen. See, covenant is not just practice when you feel like it. Covenant's the exact opposite. Covenant is commitment and it's sacrifice. And I believe this, number 2, God sees marriage as covenant, not contract. God sees it as covenant. I want you to look at the words that God uses when he describes what a covenant is supposed to look like in the book of Exodus chapter 6. In verse 5, he says this, moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. This is how God sees covenant. This is how God enters into a covenant. If you were ever to go to like a Jewish Seder meal, you would see they take this passage of Scripture and with a series of cups, they celebrate each one of the promises that God made to us as he entered into covenant. Can't you hear him saying it to you this morning? He's saying, if you enter into covenant with me, you're no longer a slave. You don't have to be a slave. You're no longer under the bondage of slavery and sin. That's no longer tied to your neck. I've redeemed you with the purpose forever. And then he culminates this incredible promise with these words that are amazing. He says, you'll be my people and I will be your God. This is how God views covenant. You see, the way we look at covenant is totally different from the way God looks at covenant. We don't understand it because every relationship that we have is a consumer relationship. See, when we look at our relationships, because we're Americans, we're naturally consumers. That's what we think. And so everything that we walk into, I believe that even your relationship with God, you might be looking at as a consumer. Because a consumer says, what do I get out of this? Just look at the content of your prayers. Like, what are those like? Is it, God, what can I get? God, I need, and I want this, and I want that. God, give it to me. Maybe when you talk to somebody else about God, is the first thing that you say what God can do for them and what God can give you. See, we're supposed to be in covenant, and what we end up doing is enter into contract with God. And as a result, that infects all of our relationship. It pours into every single one. Every aspect of our culture today is thinking of this in terms of a consumer. See, be honest, you're only connected to people to the level at which they meet your needs at an acceptable value to you, at an acceptable payment. But the moment that the cost of doing business exceeds the profitability, in other words, the moment that I have to give more love and affirmation and encouragement than I'm receiving from them, that's the moment that we drop the relationships. This is how we handle things as consumers. And when you're a consumer, when you're with your relationship with God, then naturally it bleeds over into every other relationship in life. You become a consumer in church. Why do I lead a small group? I need small groups to do something for me. Are they going to sing the songs that I like today? It becomes the same in every friendship. What am I getting out of this deal? And naturally, it happens in our marriages too. See, God expects us to be covenant people, and we want to be contract people. God takes covenant so seriously, he says that what we should do is lift up our hand and take an oath. We used to do this. Like if someone was taking an office, like in the military or a police officer, or a doctor, we made them take an oath because we wanted them to say that they're taking our lives in their hands. And we expect you to take it seriously. In fact, at one time, what we would do is we would make them open up to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and put their hand there and take an oath. Because that's the part where all the blessings and the curses come from. See, the contract that we offer people is for goods and for services, but a covenant is so much different. God says, I see you as covenant. I'll be your God. You'll be my people. See, God places such a high value on it that he expects us to take an oath and say, yes, this is true. See, what God does when he brings two people together in a covenant is he takes two individuals that are good by themselves and he puts them together to be something more powerful than they could ever be by themselves, more than the sum of their parts. It makes me think of this story I heard once of a guy. He was celebrating his 60th wedding anniversary. And he was an Irishman. Like, he still had the thick Irish brogue, still had the real accent and everything. And on his 60th wedding anniversary, he's there with his bride, and everyone's celebrating him. And just like we asked the pastrix, they said, give us some information. Give us a bit of wisdom that we could take so that we too could have a marriage that lasts 60 years. And the Irishman thought for a minute, and he said, well, actually, it's quite simple, really. In a marriage, the husband should make all the big decisions and the wife should make all the little decisions. And everybody looking on thought, well, if we give that to our wives, we won't last 60 seconds, let alone 60 minutes. And so they just pressed him a little further. They said, well, how is that working out for you? He said, pretty good, actually. Would you believe in 60 years, not one big decision has ever come up? Right? So in other words, he's let her make all the decisions. I've seen marriages work like this over and again, that God puts two people together, that are more powerful together than they are by themselves. See, God looks at marriage as a covenant. And if that's true, then what does that mean? How do we do it? Well, I think it means this. Number 3, I do really means I'll die. Wow, such a super positive message that you got for us today, Tom. I know, but bear with me because listen, this is what covenant really means. Think about it. When we take communion, what are we doing? But we're coming together and we're celebrating the covenant that God established with us. When we eat his flesh and drink his blood, we're reminding ourselves that he died for us. And we are saying back to him that we will live for you to the point of death. See, Paul understood this concept so well in the book of Ephesians, and he spells it out for us in chapter 6. Listen to what the language Paul uses. In verse 21, he says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church, his body of which he is Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And then he says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So according to Paul, it says, wives, you're supposed to submit to your husbands in everything. Now, I've talked to a lot of guys, and they get that part, and they like it. They get excited. It's like, rot, that's rot, Pastor. She needs to submit. She's not submitting enough. But apparently what they do is they stopped reading, because if they just read the next line, it says that husbands are to love your wives. How? How are husbands supposed to love their wives? As Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? He died for it. So in other words, what we should be hearing, husbands, is wives submit, husbands die. There's a wife that said, bless Jesus. Now, that's not what I mean. What I'm trying to tell you here is that what Christ is trying to tell us is, what Paul is saying through Ephesians is he's saying that husbands, what you should do is give up your passions, give up your desires. What Christ did is when he died to his own desires so that his church, his bride, could have her wildest dreams come true. That's what Paul is trying to say. Husbands, you need to die to your own desires. You need to sacrifice your own dreams so that your bride's dreams can come true. And wives, look, he said, you're supposed to submit to your husband. But actually, in verse 21, he said that we're supposed to submit to each other. And I think in the same way that we're supposed to submit to each other, I think we should also die for one another in our marriage. Some husbands would say, I'd do that in a heartbeat. I would die for my wife. Well, listen, that's not what he's talking about. He's saying die to your own dreams. Die to your own desires so that your wife, and husbands and wives should both do this. They should be dying to their own desires in honor to Jesus Christ. See, the problem we have in a lot of marriages is there's one too many living people in it. There's too many living people inside of our marriages because we're all focused on our own needs. And because I always think it's so funny, like when I stand up there and I do see husbands and wives, a bride and a groom taking these vows together, they take them with these big smiles on their face. I promise to love you forever, and in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, richer or poorer. And they get these big smiles on their face, sometimes tears coming down. They're so happy. And I want to say, you do recognize that you're promising to die, right? Like you're standing up there saying, I promise I'll die. I can't wait to die. That's what they're really saying. And because the problem is, God bless them, they're thinking good times. They're thinking health. They're thinking richer. They're not thinking sickness and poor and bad times. And as a result of this, they stop recognizing that what they're doing is commissioning themselves for a battle that is waging right outside. That as soon as they say, I do, the enemy is coming after them. Because let me tell you something, the enemy hates your marriage. Because when you do it right, it looks just like God. It's a godly man and a godly woman with the Holy Spirit in the center. That's a triune being. And the enemy can't stand anything that looks like God. And so when you read this letter that Paul is writing to the Ephesians, we miss out because it wasn't written in English. We miss out on so much. There's so much subtext that's happening in the middle of it. And look at this. When they read this was a Greco-Roman culture. And when they read Paul's letters, they were shocked. They were absolutely shocked. I think it should shock us too, specifically that word submit. Because it's a Greek word, hupotasiomai. And that word is actually a military term that could be better translated in to deploy like a soldier. See, this is what Paul's trying to say. He's trying to say that, in fact, a better translation might be to wives, arrange yourself for battle for your husband. Or when he says submit to each other, go to battle for one another in reverence for Christ. See, Paul is trying to say that there's a real battle that's going on out there. There is a battle that is raging right there. And so many times what we do is we end up fighting the person that's inside of our marriage. Instead of defending, that's the person you were commissioned to go with and fight the battle outside. And so many times we end up doing this. We call this series In the Ring. And we're going to talk about all these different ways that all the relationship and marriage and all of these things. But we called it that In the Ring, like a joke, like a boxing ring. I've heard that marriage is like a 3-ring circus. You know, there's the engagement ring, and then there's the wedding ring, and then there's the suffering. But that's not what God designed at all. In fact, God designed our marriage to be beautiful. The first one he ever made was in a garden paradise. That's what he has for your marriage. That's what God designed for you. Your marriage should look like this. There was a time in our culture where if something was broken, we didn't just throw it out. We fixed it because we recognized there was value to it. Nowadays, if something doesn't work, if the passion's gone and it's broken, we say throw it away, get a new one. In the Japanese culture, they have something I think we could learn from. It's this thing called kintsugi. And the theory is, the concept is that if you had something like a china set, and you had teacups, and that teacup were to fall and to crack, then what you would do is you would take that teacup and you wouldn't throw it away, but you would take a precious metal, like a silver or a gold, and you would melt it down and pour it into that cracked place. And then that metal would bond the piece together. And now, because of the value of that metal, that teacup is actually worth even more than it was before the crack. And even bigger than that, now it's got a story to tell. Your marriage may have cracks in it. You may have difficult moments that you have been facing, but let me tell you something. If you'll just stop and recognize you took a covenant, God intends, his plans for your marriage is that it's the best, the strongest, most healthiest marriage. I firmly believe that not one marriage under the sound of my voice right now can't be the most healthy, powerful marriage in this entire church. And you say, well, that's real nice, Tom, but you don't know the hell that we've been through. Let me tell you something. Some of the strongest marriages that I've ever seen are those that have gone through some of the most difficult and challenging moments of their lives. But they made a decision. Their secret was they'd say, we've got some cracks, but God will let you in. We'll let you pour your Holy Spirit into these broken places and heal us because we took a covenant, not a contract. I love that Jesus shows us this picture of himself by calling us the bride, because it's a perfect analogy. Because we as his bride have done everything but be faithful. Oh, we've cheated on him. We've abandoned him. We've humiliated him. We've ran from him. You say, I don't know what you're talking about. I never did that to Jesus. Huh? Have you not? Have you not ran away at times? Has there not been moments where you look to the world or maybe even your spouse to say, meet my needs, give me instead of him? The Bible says that man looks on the outward appearance, but God knows the heart. I believe that some of us here have done that. We've run away. But God, he makes this perfect picture of covenant. He said, no matter what you do, he knew walking into it that you would fail. And he said, I'm willing to be the sacrifice for you. I'm willing to lay down my life because I love you with a love that can't be contractual. It's a love that doesn't depend on your actions. It's only dependent on mine.